Thought I'd do a bit of an update on it because we've been running the vote now for nearly a month. So I thought it's about time that I let everyone know how the vote's going. So it's been really interesting. We've had lots of support. It's been really good as well because we've had groups like the Environment Agency, the Freshwater Habitats Trust, the Canal and River Trust, BBC Wildlife Magazine. They did a small piece in the magazine not too long ago. Diver Magazine did a piece. Angling Times did a feature, Anglers Mail did a feature, lots of Rivers Trust, lots of Wildlife Trusts, even the RSPB. So even groups that you're not necessarily associating with fish have got involved and have publicised the vote. So lots and lots of groups. I'm sure there's a few I haven't mentioned there as well, but it's fantastic to see these groups of people who have been publicising the vote for me, which is good because I've got zero budget for this, and it's literally just me running it. There's no team, it's me. So any help at all from people to publicise it, to write stories, or whether it's you doing a tweet or a Facebook status or anything like that, is a massive, massive help to me. So if you haven't voted already, definitely vote. Only takes a minute. There's extra questions, but you don't have to answer them if you don't want to. It's just the main: which species do you think should be the UK national fish? And then get someone else to vote. If you know an organisation or a group or perhaps a local TV or something, or local radio or local paper, because this is a national story. I mean, I'm based in Nottingham, and I've done that with my local newspaper, my local radio. But if you would like to contact them, obviously it would make. I'm not too precious that I'm not bothered if other people want to contact them and get this story out there. So far, we've had nearly 2,000 votes, which I think is fantastic, and I'm really, really pleased with that. But I don't see any reason why we can't kind of have that 10 times the amount. You know, we can really, really get lots and lots of people voting. I have in front of me, which I'm not going to show you, is the list of which species are the top 10 at the moment. Now, we're going to release the top 10 species on the 26th of March, so the top 10 that are leading it. After then, it will just be down to those top 10. Now, if you've already voted, you don't have to vote again because you've already registered your vote. If the species that you voted for didn't make it to the top 10, if you really wanted to, you could vote again. Obviously, there's no way I can stop you doing that. But if you felt that, okay, that species didn't get in, but I would then like this species to, then you can vote again. But the results are really, really interesting. The species that's winning so far, I would not have guessed at all that species would be winning, and it's winning by quite a bit as well. It's not just a hair's hair. It is actually winning by quite a bit. All I will say about this species is that it can go in fresh and salt water. So that's a bit of a clue. There are 7 species on the list that can do that. So I'm surprised that I'm not surprised actually, because it's a lovely species and I'd be happy for it to win. But it's not the one that I would have put my money on. So I'm really pleased with that. Other species on the top 10 list are pretty interesting as well. I mean, there's a couple on there I really didn't think would be in the top 10, and there's a couple that aren't on there that I'm really surprised. Again, I'm just really teasing you all. 4 of them are sea species, and 6 of them are freshwater. So it's kind of just off even, but I thought it was going to be heavily dominated by freshwater, but actually it turns out there are four sea species and 6 freshwater. So that's interesting so far. Of course, there's still another month before the top 10's revealed, so this could be completely different by then. But that's just kind of teasing you all about what species are on the list. There's been some good points that people have raised, and most people have been very supportive, but there's been some other points that people have raised to me through email and whatnot, and some of those points have been, for example, contentious about carp. Now, I'm not particularly a big carp angler. I like carp, I don't mind them, but some people have been very against carp and saying, why are they on the list? The way that I see it is that they're not a recent arrival. They've been here for 500 years. And the carp that people are catching today are by UK anglers in UK waters, by carp that were born in the UK and have been in the UK for a long, long time. So that kind of qualifies in my eyes. If you want to be more political, then you could say things like, you know, if someone's parents aren't born in the UK, does that mean the person who's born in the UK isn't British? Well, a bit more political, nothing to do with fish, but just something to think about. Another thing was sea trout. And why weren't sea trout on the list? And the main thing with that is that sea trout are brown trout. They're both Salmo trutta. And someone was very passionate about this, saying, why aren't sea trout? You know, they're very important for Wales. And I'm sure if this was the Welsh national fish, then sea trout would probably win, but it's not. It's the UK national fish. And that's my phone going off. I will start again with my phone on silent now. Hang on. There we go. So back to sea trout. So yes, so very passionate about sea trout, but they're the same species. So it's pointless me putting the same species on the list twice. It's like, for example, that's why I didn't put bringing carp back into it again. Common, mirror, leather, koi, wild. They're all the same species. They're not different species. So there's no point me doing that. So if you really, really wanted to vote for sea trout, then you just vote for brown trout. And I kind of doubted myself then because I didn't know. Actually, I thought, are brown trout and sea trout the same? So I got in contact with some fishery friends through Facebook and whatnot, and a lot of them all supported that. And another chap mentioned that brown trout were obviously introduced all over the world, and they were introduced to Argentina, they were introduced to New Zealand, and within a couple of years of brown trout being introduced, they ran to sea and became sea trout. So they have to be the same species because we introduced them somewhere else and they became sea trout. So long story short, sea trout are brown trout, so that's why sea trout on the list. And the other point was people kind of wondering what's the point of the vote essentially. And my two main points were, one, it's a bit of fun, and if that's fine if it's not your cup of tea and you're not interested. Don't vote and don't bother to email me because I'm not interested if you're not interested. So, if you don't think it's worth it, then that's fine, but I'm not bothered. The second point was that it gets people talking about fish, which of course, fish on a wider scale are in trouble in so many ways. So if the public are talking about fish and hearing about fish, then surely that's a good thing. A lot of species on the list, very few people will be aware of, and some of them have very specific issues. So, if we're talking about them, that's all good. Whether it's things like pollution, barriers, overfishing, and then of course by talking to newspapers, by talking on the radio, by talking with these TV places, it just means that I can then say these problems that fish face, let lots of people know, but also things that we can do to help fish. So not just here's the problems, deal with it. It's more here's the problems, here's how you can help. Things like eating more sustainable fish. Things like pollock, plaice are very sustainable, very tasty. They're often cheaper than less sustainable fish, and they're pretty freely available. Obviously, just check the packaging; it will tell you how it was caught and whatnot. About water consumption as well. So my local water company, Severn Trent Water, they recommend that you spend 4 minutes in the shower. You can have a little timer, and that's kind of not wasting water. Now, obviously, I'm not telling people don't wash because you need to wash, but don't have 4 or 5 baths a day. Don't spend 20 minutes singing Bohemian Rhapsody in the shower. Just use your common sense with that sort of thing. When you're using shampoo and things like that, make sure there's no microplastics, which are eventually going to find their way back into rivers and back into the fish, go up into the food chain, eventually go into us. So microplastics are a big thing, but they'll all tell you anything poly normally on the back of a shampoo bottle means it's microplastic. So places like Lush, for example, do lots of kind of biodegradable shampoos that aren't going to be harmful when they go down the sink and things like that. So they're just a couple of examples, but just little things that you can do to help the ecosystem and in turn help the fish. But overall, most people have been really, really positive, and I'm kind of focusing on that, and people have been extraordinarily helpful. So dates to remember: 26th of March. That's when the top 10's announced. Various magazines will show it off, as well as keeping an eye on our Twitter account, which you'll see a little link below, and the Facebook page as well. If you haven't voted, I can't stress this enough, get voting and get other people to vote. And if there's any outlets that you can think of for other people to see the vote, then feel free to send the link. Don't feel that you have to ask me first. If you think that this is a good story, or if you would like to write a blog on it, or anything, just feel free to spread it out there. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Some of the other questions on the blog are optional. So the main question is which fish do you want to vote for, but also there's the thing about should we reintroduce burbot, which are essentially extinct in the UK, which has had some really good and interesting results on that. There's some of the issues, so what you think are the issues that fish face, and then you can also write in there if you think there's something that's not been included. And then also about that there's no NGO for freshwater fish, so an NGO is a non-government organisation, essentially a charity, but there's nothing like that. I mean, there are groups like the Angling Trust and the Freshwater Habitats Trust which do certain things for fish, but there's nothing that is solely for all fish, from basking sharks to sticklebacks and everything in between. And I find that kind of strange. Now, that's not to say that I'm looking to set one up, because I don't really have time, but I'm just seeing if there's interest there, and if anyone else is interested, then that could potentially be something that's would be interesting to do, because I just find it funny that this huge group of fauna in the UK is not represented solely as a conservation thing. So it would be fantastic to do that. But other than that, get voting, and on the 26th of March you'll find out what the top 10 is, and then we haven't got an exact date in May yet, just because we're trying to get it televised, so we haven't got the date yet for that. So we're talking to a certain show to get it televised on it, but we will have the date soon for that, and we will announce what is going to be the UK national fish. So thanks for voting.